What is up, everybody? Welcome back to our top 25 series. We are at number 11 today. We're talking Penn State Nittany Lions. We're talking those fans out there that have to root for a James Franklin-led team. So there'll be a lot of hate for James Franklin out there unless you love him. But if you don't, we're going to be talking about him and kind of what he's underperformed. But we are going to be talking about this very, very solid Penn State team that could be one of the best teams that James Franklin has had in his tenure there at Penn State. So we're going to be diving into the preview, notable losses, talking recruits, talking the schedule, talking transfers, and that great defense they have. But before we get into that, we are going to be looking at last year's team, which was very good. 10-3 last year. They finished 13th in the final AP poll. Very, very good on offense and defense. We'll kind of dive into the numbers here in a minute. Drew Aller was okay, 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. The numbers weren't necessarily as good as some people wanted, but they have a very, very solid rushing attack out there with Allen and Singleton, that 1-2 punch. They finished the year 10-3, like I said, but the big elephant in the room for Penn State is every year they can't beat two teams, Ohio State and Michigan. All right. That's kind of been the consistent the last few years in James Franklin tenure. They've had Ohio State there on the run. They've had Michigan kind of this last year. Michigan just didn't throw a pass in the second half and they couldn't stop them. Those are the games that kind of mattered. Then they lost to Ole Miss in the Peach Bowl, which was a loss that I feel like they shouldn't have lost to. But again, those bowl games are tough because who's in, who's out, and especially when you're not playing in the big time college football playoff, you really can't hold those against them. But when you're looking at this, their offense, they're stacked, man. And last year you saw that. Like, when you look at points per game, they're 15th. They averaged 34 points per game. Yards per play, they were top 50. When you look at red zone scoring, they were number 5. They scored very well in the red zone, which was actually one of those things that they didn't do very well the previous few years, and red zone scoring went up. When you see that up there, 94% red zone scoring there, you have to like that. But from a passing perspective, they struggled. And you're looking at just, every metrics there, they're in the 80s and 70s. And you're talking about passes per game, passing yards per game, even rushing, they were okay. Yards per rush, though, they were 37th, which was their best metric, but rushes per game was about 43rd. Rushing yards per game, about 36. So they're in that range there. Really, they kind of were better because their defense was there and the game scripts that they had there, and they didn't turn the ball over. Drew Aller, the one thing that he doesn't do, he doesn't turn the ball over. They were number 1 in the nation last year for interception thrown percentage, so they were right there. But he's got to take that next step, right? This is it. This is his season here.
Yep, new offensive coordinator, Andy Kotelnicki is in there, and I think that's going to do wonders for Drew Aller. To me, this is obviously you lose your starting tackles on both sides. Good programs that produce good offensive linemen have that turnover and are easily able to plug players in. It might not be as good as when you had Olu. They also lose their starting center and Hunter Norzad, good player. So losing 3 offensive linemen from that starting group does kind of, impact you, but they can overcome it because they're Penn State. Where I think they significantly got better, it's crazy saying this, but Julian Fleming is a massive upgrade to what this wide receiver room has been. And Keandre Lambert-Smith, we've liked him. There's been, attitude issues, I think. There's been drop issues. There's been drop issues with this entire group. There's been receivers not really running the right routes at times. There's been problems in that group. So to me, Julian Fleming being a consistent guy that you can rely on. Tyler Warren now steps into a more prominent receiving role. That's a fantastic tight end, one of my top tight ends in this 2025 NFL draft. Caden Saunders is a guy that I have liked since he was a recruit. I've been banging this drum. I kind of stopped believing, but it sounds like he's ready to be an impact player. Drew Aller and him have a really good relationship. They came in as recruits together. And then this rushing attack is still going to be good. So I'm here to push my Drew Aller propaganda. I think this kid is going to have a good year. I think he's going to be, hitting his potential in this new offense with Andy Kotelnicki, calling a better offense than what we've seen. I'm very, very optimistic that this can be the year for this Penn State offense.
Kotelnicki, open that baby up, man. You got to just open that offense up. I think that's the big thing. I think James Franklin is way too conservative, and he's been way too conservative for whatever reason. Let Aller throw the football. Let him get it out there. Let him make some mistakes if he needs to. But the biggest thing is they just had no explosive plays last year. They just didn't have any explosive plays. And that's really big part of that offense. And I know I can't believe we're talking about Julian Fleming being a big upgrade, but we are. I mean, he is kind of there because I think he could be that solid piece for them. I think he can just be that kind of that glue guy, right? Think of like Jordan Whittington from Texas last year. Some of those guys that just are very solid guys. He's a senior, so he's definitely had that role filled. He's at Ohio State. He knows what it takes there. The other guy, Harrison Wallace, the third, he is explosive. So if he can get in this offense and be that guy, I really think that explosiveness could be there. They just got to open it up. They have two of the best running backs in the Big Ten easily in Singleton and Allen. And Quentin Martin Jr. is a stud too if he gets out there. So they have guys out there. They just got to open this baby up. Let them fly, baby. Let them fly. Let this offense fly. And that's where you're going to see Penn State really develop there. From a notable losses standpoint, I mean, yes, they're tackles. That's really the big one. And then Theo Johnson, they definitely developed tight ends, though. And you saw that, like you mentioned, with the tight end position. Obviously, the offensive line was that was a loss. And Theo Johnson being there. But I think that they have enough talent on that line to kind of bounce back a little bit this year.
Yeah, we could have put Keandre Lambert-Smith on this as well, but like I said, I think this might be addition by subtraction when all is said and done. So to me, Tyler Warren can step into that Theo Johnson role. I think the depth at tight end. I don't know how to say the kid's name. Andrew Rappel, Rappel. I don't know. I'm sorry, but that kid can play. He's their tight end 3 right now, and so they've got depth there. Offensive line, I think they did a good job in replacing them. So I think it's in an okay spot. Enough time for Drew Aller to make plays out there, and that's really all you need. So.
Yeah, 100%. And let's talk about tight ends. Luke Reynolds out here, the 2024 class, number 1 rated tight end coming to Penn State. And you know what? Franklin kind of cooked a little bit on the recruiting trail. Top 15 class again. They don't really go after transfers. We'll kind of mention that and kind of talk about it. But they definitely get some homegrown guys. Luke Reynolds is there, number 1 tight end there. Cooper Cousins, he's kind of slotted in that could maybe be out there. 6'6", 323 when I was going through the numbers and looking at 247 articles, and they talked about Cooper Cousins really being that guy they like, and he's ready now. He's a big boy, number 2 rated interior offensive lineman. They did a really good job. Grunkmeyer as well, 6'2", 190, number 8th rated quarterback there. Quentin Martin Jr. is kind of that prize piece for them. He looked really good in the spring game and a couple of runs that he had. But again, Penn State does a fantastic job developing running backs. If you're looking for running back talent and running back value and NFL guys, Penn State's the place to look. And Quentin Martin Jr. looks like he's going to kind of go right into that role. Liam Andrews, all these guys here, Garrett Sexton, they did a very, very good job of addressing needs, and they have a hell of a class coming in.
They do. Obviously, Luke Reynolds is the prize. Cooper Cousins is an impact player. Grunkmeyer is my QB1, and Quentin Martin Jr. is my RB1. So they got 2 of my top players as far as our rankings go, where I'm kind of hesitant. They did not get receivers. They have struggled to get receivers in. That's just been James Franklin's way over the last few years, unfortunately. Caden Saunders was one of their highest rated recruits. They need to refocus on that. I think receivers will look at this offense after this year and say, fine, we'll go there. James Franklin struggled in state a little bit, and he's struggling in the 2025 class. So there needs to be a correction there, but to me, this is still a fantastic class. You have to be happy getting, all of this talent, especially at the top. There's a reason Penn State's still in the top 15 of recruiting. I just think maybe we can set the bar a little bit higher. Maybe we can go get a 5-star wide receiver for once in a blue moon. We need to see it happen.
Yeah, I mean, we know the positions they recruit well: tight end and lineman, and then running back. Right, Corey Smith's the other guy. I didn't even mention really him, but number 25 rated running back, 4-star kid as well, out of Wisconsin. Very, very solid. More of that lightning to kind of Quentin Martin's thunder, kind of that smaller frame, that 5'11", 170 in that range. Like I said, their transfers, they don't really go after guys when you're looking at this, the transfer portal ranking, 57th overall. Fleming, you like Julian Fleming from Ohio State. He's been fine there. Nolan Rucci, 6'8", 300 from Wisconsin. Anytime you get a 6'8", 300 guy offensive tackle from Wisconsin, that's not a bad get there. Chase Meyer as well kind of gives them that kicker that they maybe have needed in the past. We've seen them lose games, close games to these big teams because of special teams, but just solid. Nothing crazy.
Yeah, that's why I threw this up for. I put the kicker on the graphic just to put another player on the graphic. He's not really an offensive player, but you know what? We're throwing him in with the offense. Fleming, to me, but we're gonna see what he is. I think he showed off some pretty good stuff at Ohio State. From Ohio State standards, maybe not, but from Penn State standards, this might be the best wide receiver that they've seen in the last decade. So,
Yes.
sad to say, but also happy to be saying it because I think Drew Aller needs someone like Julian Fleming. So fine, big, just not a lot on the transfer portal here.
No, not really. Let's go to impact players. So Drew Aller's out there. The guys that I want to mention, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen to me are very, very solid. I mean, you could argue. I know Ohio State's got Judkins and Henderson, but Singleton and Allen are right up there as the best duo in the Big Ten. And part of me really thinks Katron Allen is a better NFL running back. I love Singleton. I'm very high on Singleton. I think he's excellent when he gets outside of on the edge and really takes it. He is a big play guy. Singleton can be that guy there. I would love for backs to get more involved in the receiving game. I think that helps out Drew Aller, and they haven't done that. And I hope, with this new offensive system coming in and new offensive coordinator, they do that a little bit more. Allen to me is a solid running back, and Allen to me is one of those guys that they can lean on down the stretch. Singleton can be that big play guy, but both of these guys are fantastic, and I think that if they lean on them, but also allow Aller to really step up, make some big throws, and just have some fun with it, this could be a top offense in college football this year.
It should be. It should be with the talent that they have. Drew Aller is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the country, if not the most talented from an upside perspective. The kid has a cannon, and he was throwing 2-yard out routes last year. So if we can stop doing that, that would be fantastic. Katron Allen's an interesting one. I don't know what he is athletically, but also it doesn't matter because he is just so skilled between the tackles, like you said. And then Singleton is that bursty guy. I think both of them had a down-ish year last year and we're still super productive. Like as far as expectations go, Kotelnicki's offense is a very, very good rushing offense as well. And so I think these guys could take that step forward and maybe take a little bit off of Aller. And I think that, Julian Fleming should also be on this list, but Tyler Warren can be their go-to tight end target. I think this is a good offense.
Yeah, I didn't make this one, so don't say I'm a Michigan bias for not putting Julian Fleming on the impact players there. But let's go to the defense. Defense is loaded. When we're talking about defense out here, they are absolutely stacked. And dare I say, they could maybe be better than last year, even though last year they allowed the fewest total yards and fewest yards per play in 2023 and the most sacks. So when you think of that, their defense was absolutely loaded last year. Opponent yards per rush, opponents only averaged 2.2 yards per rush last year. Except for Michigan. Michigan was a little bit of a different beast. But overall, they definitely kind of held them to 75 yards per game. That was number one in the country last year. Their passing defense was great too. And they were number one in sack percentage last year. So they were the number one sack getting team last year. Their front seven did a great job out there. And they were a top unit. They were one of the best defenses in college football. Had they opened up the offense a little bit, we could have been talking about a Big Ten championship. That's really where we were looking at with the Penn State team.
Yeah, I think, there's a big loss here, and that's Chop Robinson. That's the biggest loss to me. But moving Abdul Carter to a full-time edge rusher should alleviate some of that problem. He played a lot of linebacker last year. Danny Dennis-Sutton is my top edge rusher in this class, and I know that is as much a hot take as you can find on draft social media right now, on draft Twitter or whatever. But that kid can play. I think he was their best just overall edge defender last year. I think Robinson offered a lot as a pass rusher, but he wasn't good against the run. Dennis Sutton does both. Abdul Carter can be that guy that's really good at being a good pass rusher, and he needs to develop against the run as well. They have the best linebacker room, I think, in the Big Ten, and that's including Iowa, who we've already talked about, who has, one of the most elite defenses I've ever seen on paper. But Kobe King and Dominic DeLuca as two of your starters right there, just elite players right there. And then Kevin Winston Jr. looks like a potential first round pick as a safety, and that's hard to come by. This team looks good on defense. Once again, we knew it.
Yeah, I mean, and also they lost. Just to bring it up, they did lose their defensive coordinator Manny Diaz. He went to Duke to be their head coach there, but they brought in Tom Allen, and Tom Allen is one of the more accomplished coaches out there, coming from Indiana, head coach. And he's definitely one of those guys. And they talked about him, and you mentioned it too, moving Abdul Carter from linebacker to end as well. That was kind of a move. Carter wanted it too, but Allen came in and said, "Hey, where do we make our best pieces? Where do we need to fit these guys?" And they did that. So that tells me that, hey, he wants them to definitely compete. And I do think that they're deep at tackle. Like, they have a lot of guys. They have 6-year seniors out there. They have a very, very deep secondary. It's loaded. Like, the Penn State's ready to go. They're ready to go out there. As far as losses go, yeah, you hit the big one when we're talking about Chop, when we're thinking of like what he brought to this team and everything there. But Johnny Dixon, Kalen King as well. That's probably another one when we're thinking of like guys out there. He had a couple pass deflections, but he was definitely someone out there that did some things out there. Johnny Dixon as well. He had 3 pass deflections, he had an interception. Daquan Hardy is another fun one out there. 7 pass deflection, 2 interceptions, 22 tackles out there. Very, very, very solid kick returner as well. And Isaac and these other guys out there. Who's the guy that stands out to you? I know you talk about Chop, but is anybody else on this list that's a big loss?
I mean, all of them, but I think every year we do this, we're gonna have a long list of Penn State defenders that they lost.
Yeah.
But the good thing is that they've just been so consistently replacing those players with players that can be even better. I think a few years ago, this list was probably even a little bit longer. And then all of these players stepped into prominent roles and succeeded. So this is obviously a good thing about the culture of that defensive program. But yeah, I mean, Kalen King was kind of disappointing at times last year.
Yeah.
Adisa Isaac was a pleasant surprise. Penn State fans probably projected that, but like he really came on last year. They're going to be fine though. That's the good thing. They're going to be fine.
And that's how much talent they have. Like, when you're thinking of that
Yeah.
defensive side, even though they lost these guys, it's like, oh yeah, we lost them, but we're just going. Like, we're just going to plug and play, and we'll be fine there. And recruiting wise, he does a good job on the defensive side for the recruits with James Franklin. And I think really John Mitchell is kind of their big guy, 13th rated cornerback out there from Florida. And when you're looking at what he does, very, very fast. He, according to like what I looked up, 8th fastest 40-yard dash of the day when they did camps down there. So very fast. When you're looking at very good man and zone cover guy. So you like that. And he does a pretty good job here. And they have, when you're looking at like pedigrees here, Chris Mitchell, former wide receiver out there. That's his brother. Nick Mitchell as well as a linebacker in the SEC. So has that pedigree that you have to really like with the guy out there. Dejon Lane is there. Xavier Gillum, Jalen Harvey, guys that just plug and play, but really Mitchell's their big piece in this offense, or in the defense, excuse me.
Yeah, Mitchell is for sure. One guy that I think is gonna be something is DeJuan Lane. He is a fast dude. He also runs track. I don't know if he's running at Penn State. I probably should know that, but he was an elite track runner. Ran like sub 11 100 meters. So that's always a good time. I think they're going to find a spot for him. He is still a little bit raw on the actual like football playing front, but they're going to find a way to get him on the field, whether that's, as a safety flying around the field, whether that's, as a corner. He had over 60 tackles last year as a senior. So I'm excited to see him play, but this is a good class in terms of like filling out depth. They always develop their talent. So just keep on doing what you're doing, James Franklin, on this front.
Yeah.
Offense will work on it.
Yeah, watch Jalen Harvey too, edge kid. They really like this kid, 6'2", 266. They talked about him being very versatile, edge, defensive line. So they love those type of guys because I think they get him in, they get him in the weight room. Harvey could be a guy that, hey, yeah, we need an edge, we're going to move you outside. Or, hey, we need some inside help. We need that versatility up front. And they do that. They do a very, very, very solid job of kind of adding those pieces there. From a transfer perspective, again, remember, we talked about it. They don't really add that many transfer guys from the portal there. Jalen Kimber was probably the highest rated transfer out there, former Florida kid coming over there. And AJ Harris as well. He was right there coming from Georgia to Penn State. And then Jordan Mayer. And again, like we've talked about plenty of times, we like the guys coming from the pedigree of like, hey, SEC teams coming over and high, college pedigrees that they can. These are not like JUCO prospects. These are not low G4 or G5 prospects. These are SEC talent, and in Wisconsin for Jordan Meyer. So these are guys that come in ready to go and ready to contribute right away.
Yeah, AJ Harris was the number 2 corner in the portal per 24/7. I disagree with that. I think Jabbar Muhammad should have been ahead of him, but either way, he's a top 5 corner in the portal that is coming over to Penn State and should slide in, kind of help ease losing your starting 3 corners. So,
Yeah.
and Kimber, same thing. Like I think these 2 guys can be impact players for them. But even if not, they've got enough depth. They're gonna find players out there, so they'll be all right.
Yeah, no, they'll be all right. Now, when you look at impact, Abdul Carter, we talked about Danny Dennis Sutton. I'm glad you put him on this list because I think both those guys are going to be huge for them coming after the quarterback, getting that pressure, and kind of trying to lead the NCAA again and sacks to really turn coming after there. Kevin Winston Jr., Dominic DeLuca. Outside of Carter, what guy in here stands out to you?
It's got to be Dennis Sutton. I could rave about all 4 of these players, but Dennis Sutton to me, I flip on the film and I just can't get enough of how he does every little thing the right way in a way that is program changing. He defends the run with tenacity. He consistently wins on the edge. He doesn't get the highlights as much as some of the other guys because his wins are just consistently. He's getting around the guy. He might not get the sack production. I think that's coming this year. I think this is going to be a team that's going to just load up on sacks. I think they're going to get creative with their pressure looks. Winston Jr. is going to hold down the back end. This is a crazy, crazy defense. I'm excited to watch it.
Yeah, and another name that we could see possibly on this list is Tony Rojas, linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
They love this kid. Like they talk about him, kind of diving into everything. Penn State boards love this kid. They think that he can be the next linebacker out there. So that's definitely another name to watch there. Now, when we're talking about wins and we're going over this, over under 10.5, 9.5, it depends kind of where they're at. When we first started this, it was at 9.5. Now it's kind of jumped up a little bit to 10.5. And I think that's interesting. I think that has a lot to do with like maybe their schedule and kind of how it plays out at West Virginia versus Bowling Green versus Kent State, Illinois, USC, UCLA, Wisconsin. Not a ton of tough games on this schedule until they get to Ohio State. So is this the year they clip Ohio State, Christian? Yeah, where are you at with this Penn State squad?
It can be. I don't know if it will be. And it's funny, pre-recording this, I told Kevin, I talked to a Penn State fan, and he said, the Ohio State game is my Super Bowl. And I know what's going to happen every year, and it sucks. And I hate that for Penn State fans, that's how it's been. Ohio State loaded up on talent, so it's really, really tough to imagine that Penn State gets by them, but it won't matter. Penn State is going to be playing in the college football playoff because I don't think they drop a game. I think they hit the over here. I think they're 11-1. They lose to Ohio State, but then that could be good enough to compete for the Big Ten title with the new rules. So I think that they sweep the rest of their schedule pretty easily. At USC might be tough, but like USC doesn't have a front 7 on either side that or an offensive line or a defensive front 7 that can hold up. So to me, this is an easy over. I'll lock it. I'll lock the over, even though it's the highest over under we've seen, I think.
All right. Yeah, you love Penn State there. I'm gonna say over as well because the schedule lines up perfectly. As long as Aller stays healthy. If Aller's there, I do think that it hits over pretty consistently there. I think the at Wisconsin is a trap game for them though. I think Wisconsin can be a little bit better this year, and I think that offense is gonna be a little bit better. But right before Ohio State, you come in there undefeated, just beat it at USC, which is a tough travel game, going all the way out to California, coming back, then going at Wisconsin. It's always a tough one. That's one that you got to be a little nervous about if you're a Penn State fan there. But outside of that, they should win every other game. Like when you're looking at this schedule. And the thing with USC that you brought up that's important, USC does not have guys to block them. Like they will struggle. USC is going to struggle up front on both sides of football because they have not recruited that position very well. You can have Zachariah Branch all you want, but if you can't have the time to throw to the kid, you're done. And I think that's where Penn State's going to really ramp up that game. Wisconsin, Ohio State are the two toughest games. If they lose to Wisconsin, you're sweating that over a little bit because now they got to beat Ohio State. But they get Ohio State at home. If there's going to be any time they win, it's going to be at home. And I'm guarantee you that's probably going to be the whiteout, right? That's going to be the whiteout game, and they're going to probably be ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, they should have beat Ohio State in Columbus last year. Quite frankly, Aller had a rough game. I think Ohio State was the better team that day, but Penn State should have won that game. It should have been a different narrative. And maybe that speaks to James Franklin not being the guy. And maybe we find that out this year. Maybe they get to the playoff, have to play Ohio State again and lose again. And then that's the end of him. But I'm curious to see how it all plays out. I think this is an 11-win team. I think this is one of the most talented teams in the nation right now.
So so as we kind of wrap this up, we both think that they can definitely get to 11 wins and they can definitely go to the playoff here. But what are we doing with James Franklin? So if he goes to the playoff, he's coming back. We understand that there. But are they capped with Franklin head coach? I've been a very big Franklin hater for a long time. As a Michigan fan, I love him because I feel like that we could beat him every year because they have James Franklin, but he does recruit well. When you watch that, I think the big thing for him, he can't let it go. I feel like he can't let his players just play loose. And I think this team feels that because every time I watch Penn State play, and I watched Penn State play for a long time, I have a lot of respect for the Penn State program. As a Michigan fan, I actually enjoy playing Penn State because I actually like their fans. They're not Ohio State people. So when you think of that, when you watch the games, though, it really takes on what their coach is. And I feel like he gets tight and the players get tight. And a lot of those close games that they've had, they've lost because their players are, I think, afraid to make that mistake. And then they end up doing that. And I feel like that comes from the head coach. And that's where I really struggle with Penn State because they have all the talent in the world, but their leader is a guy that won't let them just go play football. He tends to want to control everything. And you're not going to win a Big Ten title like that.
I struggle with it because now in this 2025 class, he's kind of struggling to get his in-state recruits. And so if he loses the recruiting aspect, I think it's done because that's the draw right now is I'm recruiting well. I think we could put it together. And I think this is the year that they do put it together. That said, I think this could be one of those where then they hang on for too long because say Drew Aller has this massive year, he goes to the draft. I like Grunkmeyer. I don't know that they'd be a capable team to turn it over to Grunkmeyer right away because they haven't recruited wide receivers and things like that. So I'm curious to see what it does, but I do think they make the playoffs. And so I think their ceiling is capped. I think there's a chance though, when you have talented quarterbacks like Drew Aller, they could go get a win in the playoffs. And then we're talking about Franklin in a different light, but he's been a big game choker, to be completely honest. And I think I don't necessarily know if that continues. I think they can beat Ohio State. I just don't think it happens this year. And so I would have to agree the ceiling is capped for them.
But hey, that defensive line can get after Howard. And I think that could definitely affect him. And if that's one of those things to kind of look at if they have that offense to go with it, but we'll see. The transfer portal also opens things up, but he hasn't done a very good job there either. And so that's the other thing. If he's going to struggle there, what does Penn State's program look like? But let us know. What do you think, Penn State fans? I'm really interested in your take on James Franklin. Where do you feel like he's at? Do you believe in Drew Aller? I know there's a lot of guys out there that still do. There are some Penn State fans that don't. But where do you think this team lies for you guys? So we appreciate you guys watching as always. Hit that like, subscribe button. If you like college football, NFL fantasy, draft, that's what we do here on this channel. And we have a lot of fun with it. So appreciate you guys. We'll check you guys in the next one.